Some people you talk to and just bam, there is an instant connection. Lucas Woody is my next guest, and he makes that type of connection, it seems like, with pretty much everyone he comes in contact with. Ironically, he started his podcast not for the connection, but for the research. How or why did he even do this? Stay tuned. So, Lucas, you started your podcast for a very different reason, being research. And the first thing I'm going to ask is, what's something you found in your research in doing these podcasts that you can kind of reveal that may be a little bit different than what you thought it was going to be?
Yeah. So as a coach, I live for the aha moments, right? Those moments when people go, oh, wow, like I didn't even think of that. And I had one of those in my interviews, which was phenomenal. And I was talking to a special guest. His name's Bobby Barber. He's a spiritual coach, and spirituality is one of the dimensions of wellness that we talk about in the model that I'm creating. And one of my goals is to help people measure their wellness in all these different categories. And it's easy to do for your financial wellness, right? Like, are you bankrupt or not? Do you have enough money in the bank? Are you spending more than you're making? Exactly, right? Are you spending more than you're making, right? Those are easy metrics to determine. Physical wellness is also up there, right? Is your A1C healthy? Do you have the right cholesterol levels? What's your body fat percentage, right? Those are all easy metrics. How do you measure your spiritual wellness? That was an interesting conversation. And so Bobby gave me a really good one. And we've heard this kind of concept before, but not in a way of like, how do we use it as a metric? But he said to measure spiritual wellness, we take a look at somebody's ability, willingness, amount of sharing the 3 T's: their time, their talent, and their treasure. And because spirituality is this idea of believing in something bigger than yourself, part of that is service to others. And so when you think about giving those 3 T's away, you're basically asking yourself, how much are you serving other individuals in your life? And so I just found that to be really profound, something that seemingly small, but very nuanced in terms of the power of like, oh yeah, okay, do I want to know how spiritual I am? It's not the number of minutes that you spend, practicing your Bible and your verses. It's not the hours that you're at church. No, it's how much are you giving of your time, your talent, and your treasure to others. So that was my aha moment from the work that I've been doing that was really, really cool.
That's interesting. Those types of stories are some of the ones that I love hearing. In this, you want to avoid repetition in your research, but in the same sense, you're trying to kind of keep things similar. So I had a guest a while back that says history doesn't repeat itself, but it does usually rhyme. How do you balance that need for like you avoiding repetition, but yet still kind of covering the same area, I guess I would say, or the same like thought process?
Yeah, absolutely. So my background originally was wildlife biology, right? Which was absolutely worthless other than 2 things. One, I'm a hoot on a hike. I can ID trees and give you all sorts of information you didn't care about to begin with, and you still don't care about after I give it to you. The other is that I met my wife in my degree, and that was a phenomenal moment of my life, and I think hers too, right? So that was great. But my background is science-based, right? So the scientific method of forming a hypothesis and doing the research, repetition is really near and dear to my heart. And so part of that process is the idea of reducing variability, right? The more variable your research, the less likely it is you can repeat it. And if you can't repeat it, then you can't technically say that there's evidence to suggest that it's true in most cases. And so one of the aspects of my podcast that was unique to a lot of other podcasts is that I started with a very specific reason. I wanted to find out these metrics by which we can measure all these different components of our wellness and put it on a scale from sickness to fitness and all the different domains. And so I did that. I created this model and still working on it, still nuanced, right? All models are wrong, but some are useful, as George E.P. Box said, statistician. So So I really, really enjoyed that idea of using research to figure this stuff out. But research has to be repeatable. So the challenge I have with my podcast is I have to ask very similar questions so that I get multiple data points to suggest the work that I'm doing. But also, if you listen to the same questions over and over in a podcast, guess what you're going to do? Unsubscribe. So I have to, so I have to figure out ways to bring in newness to these podcasts while also staying true to the purpose of my podcast to begin with, which is finding those answers that I'm looking for.
That's interesting. That really is, because I mean, like you said, the science behind it. There's a lot of podcasts that talk about science, but there aren't as many that are based in researching the science. And that to me is so cool and so unique. To me, I want to tie that in. Like, there's a passion, obviously, that you have for this. And in some of the questions I asked ahead of time, you said that do not start a podcast, or for that fact, anything else, because other people are doing it. It's trendy or whatever. You're not going to have the excitement to do it long enough to A, get good at it, or B, gain any traction. And I love those two things that you said: A, get good at it, and B, gain any traction. Everyone thinks that, okay, we're just a couple of guys talking on microphones. Obviously, there's a skill and a practice to this that we've both taken some time with. I'm going to pivot this question a little bit, though. We're going to left turn here. As a coach, what's some signs that like someone can look at and say, I'm passionate about this, rather than just this is a phase or I'm chasing trends? What's something that you see that you say this is a passion for someone?
Yeah, great question. A couple things come to mind almost immediately. One, so I was in health and wellness for a number of years. That's where I started my coaching journey, and I started that many moons ago. And
longer than we either care to admit, right?
Yeah, I don't want to talk about it. So, except for if people ask me how long I've been doing it, and they have to know that I've done it long enough, right? But I would have so many people who would want to be personal trainers, and the reason they'd want to be personal trainers is it was almost always the same. I love to work out, so I'm going to help other people work out, and I'm going to get paid money to do it, right? I'm going to be paid to be in the gym all the time. And I had to tell him, you love to work out. Do you love to watch other people work out with absolutely no benefit to yourself other than you get to help other people get better? Secondary question, can you tell somebody to push their knees out in a squat every day, 20 times a day for the next 20 years? Because if you can't imagine yourself doing that, step away. Step away quickly, because that's the type of repetition you're going to see is that same exact thing over and over. And you have to change, you have to nuance it, but you have to fall in love with that process of helping another person go through that. And so I think whether your passion is helping other people or your passion is making widgets, whatever it happens to be, you have to break that down to some of its most fundamental components and ask yourself, can I love this for a very, 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 very long time? And it doesn't have to be the same thing forever, because hopefully you grow as a human and you want to change, but you do have to ask yourself, can I keep my love for this? Even if I grow, even if the factors change, can I keep loving parts of this enough to want to do it every single day, to want to continue to learn about it? So that's another piece of it. Can I love the fundamentals of it, and can I love the process of learning and growing? I love being a coach. It's my third favorite title after husband and father. And I love learning new ways to be a coach. I'm reading a book right now called Coach Builder, right? I've been a coach for 15 years and I'm reading a book about how to be a coach. All right. So there's like, I love that part of it. So can you fall in love with the fundamentals? And can you fall in love with the process of learning about it? Because you're going to have to grow to continue to do it year after year as things change. Those two things are the things that I really think it takes to know whether or not you're passionate about something.
It's interesting you say that, because I instantly went to the side and I see why a lot of podcasts, stop after episode 12 or 15. because they enjoy what we're doing right now. They enjoy these conversations. This is my favorite piece too. We're sitting back, a couple of guys talking about really cool stuff, but the editing, the posting, all the stuff that we're doing for you those are those components that, those aren't the pieces that you're passionate about. You're passionate about the conversations. And so I can see why too. The personal trainer example I love because I enjoy working out. I do not want to tell other people how to work out all day long. That's just not, I'm going to end up screaming at some 80-year-old lady to push fast or push harder on the bench press. And it's just going to staple her to the bench and I'm going to feel bad about it. So, no, I love that analogy. That's awesome. And it makes me think too, like for me, I truly do love doing this. We've done this for such a long time and I still this is my favorite piece. But when I've got something to edit or when we've got something to post, I love all those bits of it too. It's that passion and I can see it in all the stuff you do. I mean, just the books behind you, I know are not decorative. I know.
I've never actually read those books in my life. I just like the titles and the fronts.
Right. The pretty colors and the fonts. And that makes sense. That makes sense.
Well, Josh, you mentioned something that I really want to touch on, which is that idea. I don't love all aspects of the podcast. I don't love all aspects of coaching. And so what I've had to do is I've gotten good enough that I can charge enough to afford to bring on people on my team that can do the things that I don't love to do because they love to do it. So like the podcast, and I appreciate working with you. You honor the fact you've given me really great advice on how to make it better. Right. And you've also respected the fact that there are parts of it that I'm I can't change. Because I've told you before, if the podcast had to go versus me, if it's either, I've said the podcast purpose is to learn on how to help people with their well-being. And I'm not going to change that to make more likes or subscribers or viewers. And you've always respected that and helped me find that balance. Because you've also, as a good coach does, you've pushed me to change my mentality to be able to help to grow. But that's the part that I think that really benefits what I'm doing. Because to your point, 15 episodes in, if nobody's listening, guess what? I'm still recording a podcast because it's more than just the likes and the follows. And that's where people get so caught up is they care more about that outcome of who's listening, who's watching, how much money can I make instead of, no, I really love this. Like I said, if you didn't click record, we'd be having phenomenal questions and answers happening between us, maybe more curse words, but we'd still have these conversations because it's what we love to do. We're passionate about it.
Yeah, no, it's really cool with stuff like that. And it's one of the things that I love about so many people that we work with. There is that passion for what they do, whether it be one of the racing podcasts, one of the HR podcasts, there's just this love for doing that. And that's awesome. Speaking of which, you've mentioned that having the podcast adds legitimacy to your brand. Even if it was only your mom watching, you can be like, hey, I have a podcast. Sure. How do you think that works with people when they hear that? What light bulb do you think goes off in people's head oh, he has a podcast?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, when you have a podcast, which, by the way, my mom does not subscribe to. So that's a touchy subject. No, I'm kidding. Love you, Ma. So when you have a podcast, people go, oh, he cares enough about something that he's willing to put the time, energy, and effort into making something out of it, to learn from it. Mine happens to also be I bring on experts in fields. And so there's value regarded there. And there's an understanding that the experts that come onto my show are legitimate and that they find me legitimate enough to want to come onto my show and talk about the things that they want to talk about. So I think there's so many benefits to that, which is so ironic because I did not start it again for any sort of legitimacy. I started it because I knew I wanted to create the model. I knew I wanted to have a lot of conversations with really, really smart people that knew a lot more about these different dimensions than I did. And I was like, you know what? We're going to have great conversations. Why not record them and share them with the rest of the world? And so that's where it all stemmed from. And just that desire to bring value to others is what I think aligns so well with people wanting to know more and to learn more. So having a podcast has been really helpful, and it is a lot of work, and it is rewarding, and it is a pain in the butt. But it also, it gives me the opportunity to do what I love, which is to talk about things that bring value to people's lives, and helps them optimize their well-being so their performance can improve. And so, the legitimacy that comes from that, I think, has been a side benefit that I've noticed. But yeah, people often, when they hear I have a podcast, I think they think it bigger than I think it sometimes. Because to me, it's just like, I get to talk to some cool people, and this is going to be a lot of fun, and we're going to learn stuff, and we're going to build something off of it. And they see it in a different light. But I mean, that's all forms of art, right? It's beauty's in the eye of the beholder.
It's funny. We have another podcast host that I've been around him when someone's like, "Oh, hey, I listened to your podcast," and he always goes, "So you're the guy." That is his just canned response. I absolutely love it. He's like, "So you're the guy," and he gets all excited, and the people are like, "Wait, what?" Because he's so honest and earnest about it. So something that I have thought about since we had the conversation about how your podcast, like the structure of it, and what your goals are with it, with those being very different. A lot of people, they're done with the podcast, it gets edited, they post it, we post it, however that works. That's done. That's a simple process. When you're done with your podcast, with it being research based, are you rewatching it? What are you doing to say, okay, I'm going to mark this down, this down, this down? Are you taking notes? Are you summarizing it? I'm curious as to I guess I would say the basic overview of what that post-production, let's call it a post-mortem, it looks like on that.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a few pieces. There's a lot of utilization of it in my coaching practice, right? Like, so Arthur Brooks said it best. He doesn't do research. He does me search, right? He wants to know how to get better and happier. So he does research on how to get better and happier because he wants to be better and he wants to be happier. And so he also just happens to share it with the rest of the world because he's at Harvard and, they suggest that at Harvard. So that's a phenomenal thing. Like, I have found that coaches, all coaches really are they're a version of themselves that they wish they had when they were going through the struggles that they're now helping other people go through. Right. So when I was growing up, I wanted somebody to help me figure out how to balance life. I'm a high achiever and I think way too much, ask my friends. And I'm always constantly trying to ask what's the right thing to do? How much more can I do? How do I optimize this? I will oftentimes make my life way harder by trying to optimize how I carry things in the house, right? Like I'm going to put this here. It ticks my wife off. I'm going to put this on this counter right here so that as I walk by with my next thing in 12 minutes, I'm going to be able to just pick it up. And when it's not there anymore, I flip out, right?
Same.
It's like,
same.
Yeah, exactly. Right. And so I was on this journey to figure out more about like, what's it all mean? Physical wellness was important to me for a number of years. It still is, but I've broadened my idea of what well-being really looks like. And so as I go on this journey, I want to help other people in that regard, right? What is my purpose and how do I fulfill it? And that's my purpose in life, is to help others define theirs and fulfill it so they can contribute meaningfully to the world. And so that's why I do the research that I do. So part of the utilization of this is so that I can coach other people with the knowledge that I have. In terms of how I'm doing the evidence-based research, analytics, how I'm digesting the information behind the scenes, the process that I intend to use, because I still need a lot more information before I can do this. But I have a friend. Have you ever heard of AI?
Maybe just a little bit.
So I actually have a friend who does competitive research and market research, and she does very deep work. Like, we're talking people are going to spend millions of dollars on products and they need to determine what people think of it. And so she'll actually do interviews. just like what I'm doing, like one-on-one talky interviews, not surveys, not multiple choice, but like talking interviews. And so she actually cued me into some different tools that she can now use to process that information from those interviews utilizing AI. So she dumps 10, 15 interviews and goes, pull out the themes, pull out the threads. And so when I've gotten to the point where we have enough interviews to coalesce that data, that'll be the process that I use. Right now, it's a little bit more old school. It's a little bit more tracking on my own accord, having, spreadsheets, right? To be able to process that information. I don't know why I like yada that. Like,
not even that, but just the fact that you talked about everything has its precise spot and everything needs to be as efficient as possible. And surprise, we use spreadsheets. Imagine that.
Who would have thunk it?
Big shocker there.
You want to know how far this goes. So my home, we have 4-tier vacations. So we actually have a system that we use to determine what tier our vacations are: tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, and tier 4. What's the purpose? What are the objectives? How long is the duration? How far away from home will the vacation be? Like, there's a whole system. I have a blog post about it. Like, that's the type of intentionality that I have. And for some people, they're like, you're insane. How do you live with yourself? And the answer is challengingly. But also the benefit to those thought processes, I'm actually doing a retreat here before too long. It's called the preloaded year retreat. And some people are like, I don't want to have my whole year planned out. Are you kidding me? What if I want to be spontaneous and go do the thing? I'm like, when was the last time you spontaneously took 2 weeks off and went to Europe, right? When did that ever happen to you? And so a buddy of mine, Jim Vatu, he's a financial coach. You may know him. He actually was on my podcast once, and he said, because people hate budgets because they're restricting, right? And he said, a budget is telling your money where to go instead of asking it where it went. And I loved that. And so to me, the same exact concept for your calendar. Your calendar is telling your time where to go instead of asking it where it went. And guess what? One of those two resources you can get back and one you cannot. So to me, having a schedule, having a calendar, knowing what I want to do with my time allows me to tell it where to go. I want to take time off to go be with my family. Well, I'm going to plan my 2-week vacation now, and nothing's going to get in the way of that.
That makes, I love that. It's that intentionality, because I mean, if we don't schedule the podcast, it doesn't happen. If you don't plan, it just doesn't happen. And that doesn't mean that the plan can't change. Lord only knows I have taken a lot of left turns in life. And to me, that's an interesting thing to look at with that. And I love that concept. You've mentioned your ikigai. Did I do that right?
You got it. Nailed it. Well, it's Japanese, so how we say it is probably way
probably
off.
Wrong.
Anyways,
probably wrong.
I've heard a lot of people say ikigai.
Okay, well that's so. How did you? I mean, do they get that tattooed in English letters on them or no? So give me the quick definition of that, and then how has that defined your podcast and your brand?
Yeah. Oh, I love it so much. So there are a lot of people who utilize this concept, ikigai. So it's a Japanese concept, which means a reason for being. And so it's basically their concept for purpose, right? And don't get me wrong, it's been a little bit westernized. Obviously, a lot of Eastern culture philosophies have gone through some processes to come to the Western states and be utilized for whatever purpose we see. And so the concepts that we use when we describe ikigai may be slightly different than how they utilize it. So I just want to respect that to begin with. But I'm just going to hold on. Here we go. So this was literally on my wall right in front of me because I love it so much. It's visual. So for those of you listening, get the video version, guys. Come on. But ikigai.
They don't want to look at us.
Yeah, right. I have a face for podcasts. So Ikigai in general is the where the 4 points of these Venn diagrams meet, right? So it's what the world needs, what will it pay for, what are you good at, and what do you love? And so when those 4 things come together, you have Ikigai. Now that has a little bit of a nuance of like your job, your occupation. And sure. I don't think that that's the only thing we should think about when we think about these things, that we are more than our jobs. It's one of the things that I work with my clients. High achievers get really identified with their role, and typically that becomes deleterious to their health later on when they realize like their job's going to move on without them, or right. All the things that they did in their work maybe won't last forever. And so that's a lot of stuff I work with my clients, but this is in general kind of what that focus is. And I love how it talks about, when you match what you love with what you're good at, that's your passion, but it doesn't necessarily make you any money. When you can get paid for it and it's what the world needs, but it doesn't have your passions or what you're good at, well, that's a vocation. That's just your job, right? And so when I'm working with my clients, this concept of Ikigai really comes up because I want you to love what you do. I want you to be good at what you do. I want you to find something that the world needs and what you get paid for. A lot of my younger entrepreneurial students that I teach at the university I teach at, they know what they're good at or they know what they love. And so they think that the world will pay for it. And it's a mistake that costs them a lot of frustration and pain. But then the other side of it is you have the clients that are like, well, the world needs it and they'll pay me for it, so I'm going to do it even though I hate it. And so my goal with my clients is to try to figure out how to balance all 4. And to be frank, because I get a lot of people that are like, oh, it's all sunshine and roses in your world, Coach Woody, but not all of us can love what we do every day. I get that.
Right.
No question at all. Okay. I'm not suggesting that everybody gets to find and pursue their passion. I think everybody has the right to, and if you put the work in, you can. But the truth is, sometimes you work a 9-to-5 where you get paid $65,000 for that job, or $50,000 or $45,000 or whatever you need for your quality of life. And you go mountain biking on the weekends and you freaking love it. And you get to leave work at home, and you get to, or work at work, and you get to come home, and you get to separate those two, and you don't have to stress about it. And you love going and hanging out with your friends on the weekend. Beautiful. That's a phenomenal life to live, as long as you're intentional about it. And that's my big thing is don't get to the end of life and be like, I wish I would have, because you didn't stop and take that time to make those intentional practices. Love that.
As we kind of wind down here, I've got a number of questions that I'm going to get you for some quicker answers on.
Yes.
And this is going to be ironic because normally, as we did today, it takes about 35 minutes before, when you and I have a conversation, we get 35 minutes in before we actually converse about anything that we were intending on conversing about, because we get talking about so many other cool things.
And we're just really good at just getting stuff done. We only need 3 minutes to get the task done. So let's have some fun before we do it, right? So
let's schedule an hour meeting that we're going to start at 57 after. With that, how does passion inform your approach to coaching? Because you kind of covered it with the Ikigai there, but how do you help people find maybe where they should be?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, I think a lot of it comes down to doing something like an energy audit. What do you love at home? What do you love at work? What are the things that bring you a lot of energy? And then start to audit those things, right? A lot of people transitioning to a different job, one of the first things I tell them in that career transition when I'm working with them as a coach is like, think about all the things you hated at your last job. Those are energy suckers. They go against your values. If you don't know your values and you don't know your purpose, then it's going to be really hard to make those next decisions. So doing an energy audit, because if you loved it, it's aligned with your values, it's aligned with your purpose. If you don't love it, it's disaligned. And so do an audit, right? I tell my students the best subject you can study in your 4 years here is yourself, because you need to know more about what you care about. So doing that audit can be really helpful to determine what you're actually passionate about, and then start to lean into, whether it's a side hustle or your next job, start to lean into those things that you love and try to reduce those things that you don't.
Love that. Another quick one for you. Mm-hmm. You've mentioned that you have a number of coaches. You have like a financial coach. You've talked to someone with a spirit. What is the toughest part of being coached for you?
Oh, absolutely. Is stop. I have to shut down my coaching. Like, I'm if you're a football player and you go watch football, you're strategizing. You're thinking, what would I do? What's the piece that I would look at here? You're reading you can't just be a fan, right? You can't just sit there and be like, yeah, right. Because you're like, no, this is what I would do. So when I'm being coached, I love that question. The hardest thing is to shut that down, is to stop analyzing them. I almost want to coach them through coaching me and be like, no, see, what you should have done here is you should have dived a little bit deeper into some of my limiting beliefs and better understood. And that can sometimes limit me, because I get really hyper focused on how they're coaching me, and it can be deleterious sometimes.
Sure. I get it. I wholeheartedly get it. The last big question for you. What is something that someone should look for when they are trying to find a coach or a mentor?
Oh, I love that. So I'm going to share, I have one of the most boring superpowers in the whole world. Do you want to hear what it is?
Oh, yes, definitely.
It's not flying. It's not invisibility yet. I'm working on it. My superpower is I ask really, really, really good questions.
Makes sense. I've noticed this.
Yeah. And then my follow-up to that is, once I ask those questions, I listen. And I listen beyond the limiting beliefs that you have built for yourself and society has told you are important, and what your parents said was important, and what your boss is telling you, and what your teammates are telling you, and what you're telling yourself, which is the hardest thing. I'm good at sifting through those things. And so my suggestion, and I'm not the best coach in the world, far from it. I'm constantly learning and I'm constantly growing. So my suggestion is to really look for coaches that are asking good questions. If you're stopping in the conversation and going, I hadn't thought of that, or, that's a good question. They're making you think beyond just the face value of what you're saying. If they can give you that feeling like they actually care and you can trust them to answer those really, really challenging questions, then that is a sign that you are working with somebody who's going to get you through what you're trying to get through.
I absolutely love that. To me, I feel like that is an amazing, amazing place to end. Lucas, I want to thank you for coming on. I really appreciate it. For everyone that's out there either watching or listening, this to me, I mean, the big thing that I picked up from it, working with Lucas and other things, is, first off, there are so many different reasons to start a podcast. Research can be one of them, and just the fact that you record it, well, hey, that is a total awesome added bonus. I mean, you're going to get content from it. Great. And you're doing research. Awesome. The possibilities out there are limitless. And to me, that makes it such a very, very cool thing. Make sure we've got some more great guests coming up. Make sure that you are tuned in, subscribed, followed, all the other happy stuff. As always, do me a favor, take care of yourself. And if you can, take care of someone else too. I will see you very soon.